Like, I don't want to be staring at your hand the whole time.
Okay.
Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramaddanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishno Vande Jagadgurum. Welcome everyone to our last Gita workshop of the semester. I know you guys are all very busy, so thank you for coming. Last time we went up to Shloka 21 of chapter 2, and Bhagavan Krishna is reminding Arjuna again and again of his true nature as what? As the soul, the eternal soul, as the Atman. Correct. So it's in this context that in the next shloka, Krishna says the following. Please open your app, that same app that we've been using, Vande Mataram, Gita, Bhagavad Gita in the light of Sri Aurobindo. 1 second. 2.22. It's a famous shloka because of its striking metaphor. What's the metaphor? So I'll read each pada and then you please recite. Vasam sijidnani yatha vihaya navani grinnati naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jidnani anyani sanyati navani dehi. Good. So this is that longer kind of poetic meter again, which is why the chanting style suddenly changed to a more sing-songy one. Okay, so let's look at the Anvaya first. Yatha, just as Naraha, any human being, Jidnani Vasamsi Vihaya, having cast off his or her worn out clothes, the clothes that he or she has worn all day, Aparani Navani Grinnati, and puts on a new set of clothes. Tatha, just so, Dehi, the embodied soul, the eternal soul, which gets connected to a body. Jidnani Sharirani Vihaya, casts off worn out bodies, physical bodies, human bodies, Anyani Navani Sanyati, and puts on a newer body. So it's very famous, right? Because what's the point of this metaphor? The idea is that we don't, freak out when we remove one set of clothes and put on another. Oh no, the clothes is. So in the same way, we shouldn't freak out when we cast off our physical body. In fact, Swami Vivekananda, if you know about his life, at the very end of his life, he's on his deathbed. And he breathes his last in Belumat, near Kolkata, in the headquarters of our monastic order. And at the moment of death, he makes kind of mystical contact with one of his brother disciples, Swami Ramakrishna, who was, I think, sitting in meditation at the time. And his name was Shashi. So he said, "Oh, Shashi Bhai, I have spat out my body." It's another metaphor. It's just, you just spit like it's spit, it's not something you should care about. There are a couple things I want to draw your attention to in this shloka, this verse. One thing that's interesting is Ramanuja sometimes has very ingenious interpretations. So here, what he does is he says, referring to the previous shlokas about the eternal soul, Ramanuja says, so Arjuna has already been told that he is the eternal soul, not the physical body. But what if this is a really great physical body? So when the soul casts off this physical body, it's like a lottery. Maybe you're going to get a much worse physical body in a future embodiment. Ramanuja says that's why this 22nd shloka says that Navani Grinnati Naroparani, that in the next birth you get a newer model. It's like if you have a Honda Civic, you get an upgrade in the next birth, you get a nice Mercedes Benz. And then in the next birth, you get what? Rolls Royce, the Rolls Royce of physical bodies. So Ramanuja makes a very interesting point here. He's really putting emphasis on this Navani. It's a newer body, newer, shinier, better body than the previous one, which means even if you're the eternal soul and you like one particular physical body, don't worry, you'll get an even better one in the future. Okay, so this is Ramanuja's comment on this Shloka 22. But another thing I wanted to mention is that what is the status of rebirth in spiritual life from a Hindu context? It seems to me that on the one hand, it's a great source of solace for people who are terrified of death. Many people, at some point in your life, you may have thought, wait a minute. And at a time maybe when you weren't religious or something, you might think, well, what happens when I die? It means my consciousness will completely cease. And you feel the terror of nothingness. So for those people, being told that, don't worry, your consciousness does not cease with the death of the body. You're going to be reborn again. You'll take another body. It's a great source of solace. There's another way that it's a source of solace for spiritual aspirants. In Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the orthodox view is that you only have this one life. Make it or break it. And some of these religions also believe in an eternal hell. So there's a lot of pressure on you to get it right in this life. So in that regard too, Hinduism and Buddhism has an arguable advantage, I mean, for a certain kind of temperament, because they're told that, don't worry, whatever progress you make spiritually and ethically in this life, it'll carry over into your next life. But it's not the end of the world if you don't get liberation in this life. Better if you have that intense dispassion and longing for liberation so that you say, I want it in this very life. That's okay. But even if you don't, you'll start off where you left off in the previous birth. This is the idea. So in that sense, in these two senses, I think the doctrine of rebirth in Hinduism is a source of solace. For those people who are atheistic or agnostic, who just might think that, you know, the death of the body is the end of us completely, rebirth says that's not true. Your consciousness does not cease. And for spiritual aspirants, it gives them encouragement and says, you know, that whatever progress you make in this life, that'll carry over in your next life. At the same time, for extremely advanced spiritual aspirants, rebirth is the problem that they're trying to escape from. And even the same text, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna will talk about that. That liberation means liberation from what? Liberation from rebirth. But into what? Now, this is interesting. I think we had talked about this before. There's one school of Indian philosophy, at least, which I'm aware of, which holds that liberation is a state of complete unconsciousness, like a stone. Did we talk about this? Are you sure? Yeah. So what was that school? Let's see how good your memory is, your USC students. Begins with an N. No. Yeah, good. Okay, that was good. That's pretty good. So the Nyaya school says it's you don't have consciousness when you attain the liberated state. So it's as if you become a stone, which is pretty weird. But Vedanta doesn't say that. Yeah.
Well.
Oh, go ahead, please. We have a Nyaya expert here.
I don't claim that.
Okay.
I wouldn't want you to use that label for me either.
Okay, but go ahead.
If Nyaya is all about logic, and I'm taking a little liberty here in the sense that I'm deputizing Western propositional logic into Eastern Nyaya philosophy. Consciousness is like Schrodinger's cat. You go this way.
It's like what?
Schrodinger's cat. You go this way or that way. Between existence and not, true and false. However, the greatest ideal, I suppose, again, I'm deputizing Western propositional logic, is to reach one or the other in the duality that exists in that, which is truth or false. True or false, like 1 or 0.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Sorry.
Okay. This might. I'm trying.
Okay.
I'm trying to convey my thoughts.
Okay. But does it relate to what I just said about Nyaya's ideal of liberation? Okay.
If consciousness is ambiguity, being unconscious.
Well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean consciousness is ambiguity? I'm not even sure.
You have a choice.
Who has a choice?
When you're conscious, you can make conscious decisions. You're not.
Yes. Okay.
When you can make conscious decisions, you can choose between right and wrong, what is and what isn't, and so on. But in Nyaya, there should not be a choice. It should be a straight line either to true or false.
No.
Right?
Yeah, no. I think we're going in a different direction altogether. I'm just talking about the concept of liberation in different schools of Indian philosophy. So let's not, because I think the issues you're getting into are about sort of, do we have free will or not? This is a very different issue. Yeah. So I think that'll take us too far afield if we go there. But all I wanted to mention is that in Hindu schools, there are differing conceptions of the state of liberation for the soul. And according to Nyaya, the state of liberation is a state of literally of unconsciousness, which is a bit weird. That's all I wanted to point out. Whereas in Vedanta, the idea is that you retain consciousness. But depending on the particular school of Vedanta you follow, the nature of liberation differs quite dramatically. So the Bhakti schools of Vedanta, for instance, believe in the highest goal of dwelling in a higher loka, which is a kind of eternal heaven, with your Ishta Devata, with your chosen deity, and you lovingly worship, whether it's Krishna or, whoever, you take your pick. And you're still a kind of a liberated eternal jiva, individual soul, separate from God, and you're worshiping God in this way. And then Advaita Vedanta has a very different ideal of salvation. Salvation is even a very Christian sounding word, liberation. And they say, Shankara says, there's no coming and going for the Advaitin. All this nonsense about heavens and hell. They don't say it's nonsense, they say it's true, but it's a lower level reality. Or at best, it's a temporary halting kind of like a rest stop. It's called Krama Mukti for certain people who do the right combination of meditation and rituals. They end up in this loka called Brahma Loka. After a certain period of time, what's that highest liberation? It's resting in your true nature as the non-dual Brahman, non-dual pure consciousness. Yeah. Gradual liberation, or liberation by stages. So you don't go directly into the highest Advaitic liberation, which is resting in your true nature, but you remain in a heaven with something like a personal God, and then after a long period of time, and you enjoy there, and you remain as an individual soul there. That's what's important. And then ultimately you merge your individuality in non-dual Brahman. So there's no longer individual souls separate from the highest reality. Okay? But in either case, either the bhakti form of salvation, of liberation, or the Advaita Vedantic conception of liberation, the individual soul still remains, and there's consciousness. So the idea is that this verse is saying that, don't worry, you're going to retain consciousness forever. You never lose consciousness. Certainly not with the death of the body. Okay, so that's the basic idea. This is a Vedantic text, as I think we talked about in the first class. It's not a Nyaya-based text, so it's not the liberation of the state of unconsciousness. It's a state of consciousness. Yeah.
Sorry. When you point at the book, are you saying the translation or the interpretation is a Vedantic text, or that?
No, the scripture itself, the Gita itself.
Is Vedantic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's considered one of the Prasanatraya, which means one of the three scriptural pillars of Vedanta: Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and Brahma Sutra. Exactly. And then there are different commentaries from the standpoint of different schools of Vedanta, but there's absolutely no ambiguity about whether it's a Vedantic text. And in fact, the traditional understanding of the Gita is that it's a very sophisticated commentary on the Upanishads. That's the idea. Yeah.
My second question.
Yeah.
How does Vishishtadvaita differ in its interpretation of liberation from Advaita?
I just told you, because I said Bhakti schools of Vedanta have this understanding of a higher loka. This is exactly like Ramanuja. Ramanuja says liberation consists in you remaining as an individual soul, but in a liberated state, in a higher loka with Vishnu. And you're lovingly serving Vishnu, worshipping Vishnu. This is it. There's nothing beyond that. He doesn't even believe in Nirguna Brahman. He doesn't believe in non-dual pure consciousness. He doesn't accept Nirguna Brahman. On the 30th, I'm giving a lecture at the Vedanta Society of Southern California called Was Shri Ramakrishna a Vishishta Advaitin? So you might be interested in that. Anyway, because there's some controversy about that. Okay, so any other questions before we move on to the next verse? No? Okay, so the next two verses are Krishna repeating the same thing, so we won't spend too much time on the next two verses, or the next three verses really, but let's go through them. And then shlokas 26 through 28 are quite interesting. So let's first look at Sloka 23. Nainam chindanti shastrani nainam dahati pavakaha nachainam kledayantyapo nashoshayati marutaha. Okay, so Anvaya. Enam. What is the enam? It means this. This what? This Atman, the eternal soul. Shastrani, weapons, not chindanti. Weapons cannot cut it. Enam, this Atman, pavakaha na dahati. Fire cannot burn it. Right? Cha enam apaha na kledayanti. Apaha is water. Water cannot wet it. Marutaha na shoshayati. Wind cannot dry it. Okay, so it's Krishna is just repeating over and over to Arjuna that no matter what you do to the physical body, nothing will happen to the Atman. It can never be harmed. Okay, so that's the basic gist. And then he says literally the same thing again, except in slightly different language in the next shloka. So let's look at it. Achedyoyam adahyoyam akledyo shoshya evacha nityah sarvagatah sthanuhu achaloyam sanatanaha. Okay, so ayam, it or this is achedyaha, cannot be cut. So this is literally, each one of these adjectives corresponds to the previous shloka actually. So remember the shastrani, the weapons, cannot cut it. This is achedyaha, cannot be cut. Next one, I am adahyaha, cannot be, you guess? It's the same verb, yeah, cannot be burned. Nainam dahati pavaka in the previous shloka, cannot be burned. Akledyaha, that's the kledayanti from the previous verse. Nacha enam kledayanti apaha. Water cannot wet it. It's unwettable. It's like a super diaper or something. Ashosyahacha. This corresponds to the last pada of the previous shloka. Na shoshayati marutaha. Cannot be dried or parched, right? Okay. And then Krishna says, Ayam, this Atman, is nityaha, meaning eternal, sarvagataha, all pervasive, sthanuhu, immobile, basically. Even like the trunk of a tree can be called sthanu. Achalaha means almost the same thing, actually. Achalaha, without movement. Sanatanaha eva. Again, it means something like eternal. So this is Sri Aurobindo's interpretation. It is, or translation, it is uncleavable. It is incombustible. It can neither be drenched nor dried. Eternally stable, immobile, all-pervading. It is forever and forever. Okay. Any questions about this one? I hope not, because Krishna has told us this about 10 times already. Okay. Okay, so now, Sloka 25. Avyaktoyam achintyoyam avikaryoyam uchyate tasmad evam vidit vainam nanushochatim arhasi nanushochitum arhasi. The font, the default size is so small. I'm straining my eyes. And if you try to change the font, the app crashes on iPhone. So this is the problem. I complained. I give them 1 star until they fix it. So if you're listening out there, please fix this iPhone glitch. Okay. Anvaya. Ayam. Again, that same Atman. Avyaktaha. Anyone know what avyaktaha means? What does vyaktaha mean? Vyakta. I think in most Indian languages, it means the same thing. Well, avyakta, yeah, but what is vyakta, the opposite of it? Yeah, express, manifest, yeah. So avyakta means unmanifest, right? In this physical world. Ayam, this Atman is also achintyaha. This you should all know. Unthinkable. Cannot be thought of. Ayam avikaryaha uchyate. It's not subject to change. Tasmat enam evam viditva. Having known these facts about the Atman, anushochitum na arhasi. You have absolutely no reason to grieve over the death of either yourself, your physical body, or the bodies of those you are going to kill or cause to be killed in a righteous war. Not that killing is good and all that, but this is a righteous war. You're on the right side of the war, and it's from that standpoint that Krishna is saying this. Any questions before we move on to, oh, sorry, one thing I wanted to mention here. Shankara was not unaware that Krishna is saying the same thing over and over, or seems to be saying the same thing over and over again. So he raises this question. Isn't this a fault in the scripture? It's called punarukti doshaha, to be repeating the same thing. He says no. He says, why is it not a fault? Durbodhatvat atma vastunaha, which means because the Atman is such a difficult thing to understand, to grasp by us ordinary stupid people. That's why Krishna keeps beating it over the truth of the Atman. Krishna keeps beating it over our heads. This is Shankara, what he says. Okay, so now let's get to the next interesting stuff. Avikarya means unchangeable, unchanged. What does Sri Aurobindo says immutable, which just means the same thing, because mutable means subject to change. Immutable means not subject to change, right? So why don't we read Sri Aurobindo's translation of this? It is unmanifest, it is unthinkable, it is immutable, so it is described. Therefore, knowing it as such, thou shouldest not grieve. The English is a bit British Victorian. Okay, now we get to Shloka 26. This is quite interesting. He shifts gears suddenly here. Athachainam nityajatam nityam va manyase mritam tathapitvam mahabaho naivam shochitum arhasi. Okay, Anvaya. Atha cha enam nityajatam. Now, Bhagavan Krishna here is like a skilled lawyer. He's trying to make a case. What's his case? The case to Arjuna, to make a case to Arjuna that he should fight in the war. He begins with the highest kind of Vedantic teachings. Your true nature is not this physical body, not even the mind. It's the eternal soul, which can never be killed. Then he shifts gears here. He thinks, well, wait a minute, maybe Arjuna is not up to that highest teaching of Vedanta. Let me come down to his level. Even if you think that the soul is the body and that the soul is subject to death, even then you should not grieve. This is the next line of argument. So he's thinking about it from different standpoint. Even if you're a gross materialist, nihilist, atheist, even then you shouldn't grieve. So it's a very interesting, but okay, now, but there's, I'm oversimplifying here because there's a bit of a complication. Different commentators interpret the position being embodied here in different ways. So first let's look at the meaning of the shloka. Okay, so atacha enam nitya jatam. So even if you think of this Atman, of the soul, as nitya jatam, as something that's continually born and reborn, and nityam va mritam manyase, and continually dies, something that continually is subject to death. Tatha api, even then, he mahabaho, oh strong person or mighty armed one, he's referring to Arjuna, he's buff. Tvam evam shochitum na arhasi, even then you should not grieve. Now the controversy here is regarding what exactly, what standpoint is he expressing here in the shloka? So I already suggested one interpretation. There are two that I've encountered so far in the few commentaries that I've read. One is that this is a kind of materialistic standpoint, something like Charvaka. You know Charvaka? Who knows Charvaka? Nobody knows about Charvaka? This is a very, it's a very old Indian philosophical school which said that the Vedas are the ravings of lunatics. They didn't believe in any higher reality or any eternal soul. And they said the goal of life is, it's like hedonism. So you should enjoy life while it lasts. It's very interesting. So the orthodox philosophical schools like Vedanta argue against the Charvaka position. So one possibility is that Krishna here is saying, even if you are a complete materialist, you don't believe in any higher reality, you don't believe in any kind of eternal soul, you don't believe in any God, even then you should not grieve. That's one possibility. Ramanuja says it very clearly. He says that in this shloka, Krishna is thinking of the standpoint of somebody who identifies the soul with the physical body, which is subject to death. And there's no soul over and above that perishable body, okay? The problem with this interpretation, if there is a problem, I don't want to take a strong stand on this, is that it's nitya jatam and nitya. So this is weird because materialists don't generally believe in rebirth, or the idea that because once you're gone, you're gone. So that's why it doesn't quite map perfectly onto this strict materialist position. So there's another commentary I found in our tradition, in the Ramakrishna tradition. The monk's name is Swami Tapasyananda. He has a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, not shloka by shloka, but he does comment on this shloka. He has a very interesting suggestion, and he takes very seriously this nitya jatam, and then that this is a belief in a perishable soul, a soul that continually dies and continually is reborn. And he says this is the position of Purva Mimamsa. Does anyone know anything about Purva Mimamsa? Never heard of it. Well, okay, before Shankara, yeah, certainly before Shankara, centuries before Shankara. There are two Mimamsa schools in Hinduism. One is called Purva Mimamsa, the other is Uttara Mimamsa. Uttara Mimamsa means Vedanta. But that's not just Shankara, that encompasses all the different schools of Vedanta, including Ramanuja and Madhva and Vallabha and all the others. But Purva Mimamsa is the school that really focuses on the rituals taught in the Vedas, what's called the Karma Kanda. Do this, do that. Vedic injunctions. You should be married, you should be a Brahmin, you should perform these sacrifices, Ashwamedha sacrifice, all these other things. These are, and then what's the result of doing the sacrifices properly? You go to a heaven, but this is not an eternal heaven, it's a temporary heaven, these kinds of swargas. So the goal is for if you in this life do certain Vedic rituals properly in the right way, you get rewarded by, after you leave this physical body, you go to a temporary heaven. But what happens after the time's up? You come back again. And there's no escape from that. And they don't see that as a bad thing. It's just, you just keep, in this life, you do your best to do the rituals and you have a good time in this. It's like going to a luxury resort every once in a while and then coming back and you're back to the old grind. And then you go back to the luxury resort, then you go back. So anyway, so this Tapasya makes it very interesting because this is arguably this is, it takes more seriously this nitya jatam, the fact that this is not a straightforwardly materialist position, one that just believes that after the death of the physical body that consciousness ceases, right? So anyway, so I don't want to, as I said, I don't want to take a strong stand. I'm going to throw out one more suggestion at least and say that because the Gita most likely postdates Buddhism, Krishna may also be thinking of something like a Buddhistic position. Because Buddhism, again, here there's a lot of controversy about what exactly Buddha believed, but at least certain prominent schools of Buddhism do not believe in an eternal soul. And they certainly don't, not necessarily that they don't believe in God, but at best they were agnostic, and they said it's not relevant to spiritual life. So you don't have to believe in a God. You don't even have to believe in any eternal soul. But they believe in rebirth. That's what I was thinking. This is my idea. This is not something I found in a commentary. But in a certain sense, you can think of Buddhism as falling under this category because they believe that there's no eternal soul in the way that Krishna has been teaching Arjuna. At the same time, they believe in nitya jatam and nitya, that you do pass away when the physical body dies, but then you get reborn again, nitya jatam, right? So maybe, I'm just wondering, I don't know. So anyway, it's a little bit tricky to figure out exactly what viewpoint Bhagavan Krishna has in mind in the shloka, but that's something to keep in mind, that there is this controversy. Sorry? Yes, good point. So that comes in the next shloka. So thank you for the segue. So the reason why whoever this shloka is referring to, these materialists or Purva Mimamsakas, the reason why they should not grieve over the death of the physical body is given in the next shloka, which is shloka 27. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityur dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasmad apariharyethe haryerthe tasmad apariharyerthe natvam shochitum arhasi. Good. So, Anvaya, he indeed, jatasya mrityuhu dhruvaha. Dhruva means certain. For anything born, death is certain. Mrityuhu is certain. Mritasya janma cha dhruvam. And for anything that's dead, birth is certain. Tasmat apariharye arthe. Regarding things that are inevitable, apariharya, things that are apariharya, things that are unavoidable, that you have absolutely no control over. Tvam shochitum na arasi, you should not grieve. This is the philosophy that's meant to convince people who don't even believe in an eternal soul. The idea is, this reminds me on the Western side, you're talking about Western philosophy, but it reminds me of Stoic philosophy, the Roman philosophy. Yeah, the idea, they didn't believe in an eternal soul, but they strongly believed in renouncing attachments. And their idea is, whatever you have no control over, resign yourself to it. Because if it's going to happen anyway, it's not rational to worry yourself over it. Instead, submit to it with equanimity. This is the idea. Be tranquil, because you have no control over it. So one way of interpreting this shloka is that Bhagavan Krishna is counseling he's giving a kind of stoic advice to Arjuna. But to some extent, it depends on how you understand the viewpoint expressed in the previous shloka. Ramanuja here is at his most ingenious. So I wanted to discuss his interpretation of the shloka in a bit of detail. Remember that his interpretation of the previous shloka is that the viewpoint is that the soul is nothing but the perishable physical body. So with that in mind, Ramanuja is saying, so what's the reason given? Here's how he does it. Physical body is nothing but matter, insentient matter. So what he's saying is, he gives a nice example. He says, imagine that there's a clay, just a bunch of clay. And then he says, now shape it into a lump. So this amorphous mass of clay is shaped into a lump. What's the next step? So that's step 2. First step is just clay. Second step is you shape it into a lump of clay. Third step is you create a jug out of it. It's the same clay, but you make a jug out of it. Fourth step is, can't read my own handwriting. Oh yeah. Then at some point in the future, that pot is shattered. It breaks for whatever reason out of, somebody breaks it or just because it's been so long. So what remains? A potsherd. Does anyone know what a potsherd is? This is slightly old English, but it means a fragment of a pot. Fragment of clay. And that's 5. 4, right? In my count, yeah. First clay, second lump, third jug, fourth potsherd, fifth pulverized. Nothing but powder is left. So now what Ramanuja is saying, now let's go back to the first thing. The first state is just this mass of clay. The second state is when it's shaped into a lump, right? So what Ramanuja is saying is that from 1 to 2, if you go from the mass of clay to the lump, it's as if the lump is born, because the lump wasn't there before. But something dies at the same time. What dies? That mass. And he applies the same logic to everyone. So from 2 to 3, 2 is the lump, 3 is the jug. When the lump is shaped into the jug, the lump dies, but the jug is created, is born. In that sense, he's interpreting nitya jatam and nitya mritam from a strictly materialistic standpoint, which I think is quite ingenious. It's very interesting. He's taking death metaphorically, right? But you don't see it. Where's the jug? Now it's a potsherd. It's just fragments, right? So in that sense, I think is very clever. And I don't know anything about physics. Are there any people who are experts in physics here? We have an expert in Nyaya, but what about physics? I'm joking. I'm just poking you. Anyone who knows something about physics? I'm just okay. So have you heard of this? The law of the conservation of mass. Oh, is that very obvious?
Yeah.
Okay, see, to a humanities guy, that's not obvious. So what is it? Can anyone tell me what the law of the conservation of mass is?
Mass can be either created or destroyed. They just be transformed.
Yes. So I think this is exactly what Ramanuja is talking about, right? Nothing is destroyed. So why should you mourn over that? It's just a different form of the same thing, right? And you can even see it as being born again in different forms, dying in other forms, but being born again in another form. What's to grieve over? This seems to be the idea.
This is like sort of analogous to the I think Handbook.
Mhm.
They say clay is the truth, but it changes form.
Yeah, that's a nice point. This guy has done his Vedāntic study, actually. So yes, this opens a whole can of worms, which I think is worth opening. It's very interesting, actually. So in Chandogya Upanishad, there's some mantras where the Rishi explains the relationship between Brahman, the ultimate reality, and Jagat, this world. And the Rishi uses some very striking metaphors. Two of the most striking of which are, one is clay. It's as if you're shaping clay into differently shaped and sized pots. The other metaphor is you have this mass of gold and you shape it into different ornaments, earrings, necklaces, bracelets. Now, what's interesting is this seems to suggest that this world is not unreal, but it's a manifestation of Brahman. Because does it make sense to say that earrings are somehow an illusory appearance of gold? No, it's a real formation of gold. Does it make sense to say that a clay jug is an unreal appearance of the clay? No, it's a real shaping of the clay. So Shankara and his followers have a hard time explaining these metaphors. So he somehow, by hook or by crook, brings in his favorite metaphor, which is, does anyone know Shankara's favorite metaphor to explain
Rope.
the unreal? Yeah, the rope and the snake. So he says we should understand the clay and the pots and the golden ornaments in terms of the rope and the snake. What's the rope snake? It means that there's actually a rope on the ground. I mistakenly see it as a snake and I get frightened. But then when I see it correctly, I say, oh, wait, it was a rope all along. That means there never was a snake. But is that really the best way to interpret the clay and the pots? Does it really make sense to say this clay was never a pot? The pot will eventually get destroyed, as Ramanuja himself points out. It'll become pulverized. Does it mean that it never existed? Well, it doesn't seem that commonsensical to say that. So this clay pot thing opens up a whole can of worms about what exactly is the relationship between Brahman and Jagat. And there are centuries-long debates among the different schools of Vedanta about how to interpret the clay in the pot in the Chandogya Upanishad. Anyway, so that's just flagging that as a very interesting issue. So thank you for bringing it up. And so let's wrap it up. We started last week, we started doing a brief meditation at the end of each class. So I want to leave a little bit of time for that, but let's do one more shloka before we get there. So shloka 28. Any questions about 27 first? No. Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not that the soul is going to be transformed. So the question is, I don't know if the online people caught it, but you're saying materialists don't believe in any kind of soul. So why would shloka 27 provide solace for those people? Because you're asking, doesn't Krishna say that you're going to still exist in a different form as soul? But he's not talking about it as soul. It depends on the interpretation, but the one that we're thinking of, which is Ramanuja's for the moment, we're just the physical body. So even if you identify with the physical body, every single particle of that physical body existed before the birth of this body, just in a different form, right? Even after the death of the physical body, the law of the conservation of energy, right? Or something, I mean, isn't that relevant?
Energy.
Even when you cremate, nothing disappears. It's still there in a different form. It's in ashes now, and it's in, right? That's the idea. Whether it really provides solace to materialists is a good question. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's maybe doubtful, arguably. Yeah, right. And that's the really terrifying thing, right? The loss of consciousness is what terrifies a lot of people. In that regard, this shloka does not provide much relief, but I don't think anything can provide relief to the person who, yeah, it's a pretty depressing life, right? So eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. You know where that's from? It's from the Bible, actually, which is interesting. There's a very sort of seemingly pessimistic book in the Old Testament. Old Testament is not the right word, the Hebrew Bible, we should say. The book of Ecclesiastes, where there's supposedly spoken by King Solomon, who had everything in life. And at the end of his life, at the fag end of his life, he's saying these things, very disenchanted. And he says there's nothing to this world. When you try to enjoy, you find that you can't get what you're looking for out of these enjoyments. So eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Almost moving in a direction of nihilism and materialism, but then he pulls back at the very end and says, so you should have faith in God. It's a confusing book, but it's very interesting, and it raises a lot of interesting theological issues about the Bible. Anyway, that's a completely separate issue. So let's look at Shloka 28. Most commentators see this as a continuation of the previous shlokas. That's why I want to end on this one, because it's a kind of a unit. These three shlokas, 26, 27, and 28, it's explaining a different kind of viewpoint for people who don't believe in an eternal soul. So, avyaktadini bhutani vyakta madhyani bharata avyakta nidananyeva tatra ka paridevana. Okay, Anvaya. Hey Bharata, O Bharata, Arjuna. Bhutani, creatures, avyakta adini. In the beginning, they are avyakta. Again, in that same sense of unmanifest. Invisible in a certain sense. They're not perceived. Avyakta nidhanani. At the end too, they're avyakta, they're unmanifest. Meaning after the death of the physical body. Vyakta madhyani. And it's only in that middle phase that they are vyakta, that you can see them. Eva. So, tatra ka paridevana. So what is there to sorrow over? This is the idea. Now again, I mean, if we follow Ramanuja's interpretation starting from Shloka 26, which is that 26 is really about those who identify the soul with the perishable physical body, then 27 and 28 really are of a piece. The idea is that, go back again to this clay, lump, jug, potsherd, powder kind of sequence. What is this? Just imagine the jug now. Let's just take the jug. Prior to the creation of the jug, that jug it's not that it didn't exist, it was avyakta. It was unmanifest, but it was latent in the lump of clay, right? And after the jug is broken into pieces, it's avyakta. You don't see the jug anymore, but it's not that it's disappeared, it's that it's in the form of potsherd. It's in an unmanifest form, the same. So that's the idea. So this is Ramanuja's interpretation of these three shlokas, which I mean, it has the virtue of consistency, but as I said, 26 is a pretty mysterious viewpoint. It's not immediately obvious what standpoint is being discussed here. So it's a kind of open question. I don't want to be dogmatic about what it could be. So any questions before we do the meditation? It means we cannot comprehend it with our finite minds, something like that.
Okay, thank
you. I mean, it's something that can be realized. It has to be realized, and we can the intellect can sort of point to it, right? But full understanding is not possible, but we can have knowledge of it. We can realize it through spiritual practice. I think that's the idea. It's about the limitations of the finite mind. Yato vacho nivattante aprapya manasa saha. This is from Taittiriya Upanishad. It's describing Brahman as yato vacho nivattante aprapya manasa saha. That from which words turn back and even the mind turns back. Because it's just so transcendental and so different from what we're used to in this material world. Right? In that sense, I think. Does that make sense? Any other questions? No? Okay. I think it's the right place to end, because then the next few shlokas go back to the Atman, and then suddenly shifts gears again in shloka 31 he comes down to a different, or moves to a different standpoint. As I said, good lawyers, they try to cover all their bases. So then he starts thinking about, he tries to convince Arjuna on the basis of him being a Kshatriya, a warrior, belong to the warrior caste. What are the duties of the warrior caste? What if people make fun of you or lose respect for you? So he goes there too. So it's very interesting. This Krishna gives a kind of multifaceted justification for fighting in the Kurukshetra war. Okay, but we'll get to that next semester, I guess, right? In mid-January, roughly. So you'll tell me when it is. Good. So enjoy your, well, don't enjoy, you're not gonna be able to enjoy until the end of the semester. You guys have some tough, few hard weeks left, and then vacation, and then I'll see you again in January. So let's, yes. Yeah. I'm giving it, okay, if you want me to plug a couple of my lectures, I can say. So on 26th and 27th, I'm giving a lecture called Vedanta for Dummies. Like the title? In the Ramakrishna Monastery, 27th, Sunday. It's a Sunday talk at 11 a.m. in Trabuco Canyon, which is in Orange County, near Irvine. Vedanta for Dummies, it'll be live streamed. It'll be live streamed and uploaded to YouTube if you're interested. And then on the 30th, I'm giving a class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna in our Hollywood ashrama at 7:30 p.m. And the title of the class is, Was Sri Ramakrishna a Vishishtadvaitam? Which, as I said, is a controversial topic. But do you have a question about that, or?
I just wanted
Yeah, it'll be live streamed. You have to subscribe to the Vedanta Society of Southern California list on YouTube, and then you'll just be alerted. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you just click subscribe on that, and any future lectures I give, you'll be notified. Anything else? Okay, so this, I told the head Swami at our center that we started meditation last week, and because he's so senior and he's very wise in these things, I asked him for advice, and he said, instead, last week what we did was we repeated Om, we chanted Om 3 times, and then we made it silent. He said, look, you only have 5 minutes, and these are kids who are very stressed out. Chant it verbally for the whole period. This is a suggestion. I think it's a good suggestion. So let's try that this time. So what we'll do is, and remember, because chapter 2, the keynote of chapter 2, I hope by now it's clear to all of you, is that we are not these perishable bodies. We're not even the mind. We are eternal souls. So let's try to meditate on our true nature as eternal souls. And we can meditate on the heart. We can think of it as a light or something, some kind of light. And the mantra will just be the pranava mantra, Om. We'll do it for about 5 minutes. So just, and this should be repeated out loud. Huh? So please close your eyes. Let's first, one deep breath, breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Now please repeat Om with me and try to synchronize it with the breath. Om. 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 Gently open your eyes. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Stop recording, right?